Sport and Exercise Science, Unit 4, Research Methods, Assignment 1, Ethical and Legal Issues with Research, done by me, Harry Brown. Now, why does there need to be controls put in place when doing research? The answer to that is so that they can be monitored and so that they make sure the research is done sticking to the ethical and legal boundaries put forward by the committee that's allowing it. This will therefore avoid severe punishments, some of which can be, like I say, very, very severe. Also, it can mean that issues can be avoided, such as things like injuries as well. Now, the ethical issues that can arise are, like, I've got a few acronyms here, which are the DRIP and the 4Cs. So the DRIP that stands for the D stands for deception, which is whereby you can't deceive your participants in any way. You have to make sure they know exactly what they're doing during the experiment. You can't say it's going to be about one thing and then make it about another. This can therefore have issues with informed consent, which is the I of the DRIP there, as they'll be consenting to the wrong thing if they get deceived. So you need to make sure that they are totally consented to everything that's going to be done. The R there stands for the right to withdraw. Now, every participant in a research project will have the right to withdraw, and that's right to withdraw themselves from the experiment, so they don't do it anymore, as well as they are able to withdraw their results if they don't want them being shown. The first P there stands for protection, which is the protection of participants from harm, which is whereby you're not allowed to physically or emotionally sort of harm the participant, obviously, for reasons like, obviously, they could get injured, things like that. And then the privacy bit is the last P, which is due to the Data Protection Act, they shouldn't have their name revealed in any of the studies when the results are sort of published, and also their results should be locked away so that no one can find their results or anything like that. Now, the 4Cs there, two of them we've already covered, which is consent and confidentiality. The other two are competence, which is how confident you are in doing the study. So, like you say, you shouldn't be taking lactate tests if you've never done it before. You need to make sure that you've had some sort of experience in the area so that you know how to do it. And then the last C is conduct, which is basically how you deal with the participants, as you need to make sure you show them respect and that you're professional with them in that sort of sense. Now, the bases there, that's the British Association for Sport and Exercise Sciences. This is the committee that generally all research will go through in terms of sport and exercise science. So they have their own code of conduct, which all research done through them has to abide by. So that it's got the same sort of rules as what I've explained above. Things like like you can't harm the participants, things like that. Also, all research projects will have to go through a committee before they're allowed to be done, to make sure that everything that you do is going to be within those ethical guidelines. And then if they're not, then they might offer to change. You'll have to change your research study a little bit in order to fit those criteria. There can also be legal issues with doing research, and this is just generally you've got to stick within the law when you're doing research. Again, it's things like you can't harm people or obviously kill people or anything like that. And the other one as well is the CRB check. So generally, if you're working with children, you'll have to get a CRB check, the criminal records check, to make sure that you've not done anything, you've not got any criminal records in the past, basically, to make sure that you're safe to work with the children there. So then, moving on to task 2 of the assignment, moving on to the scenarios. First scenario I've come up with is whereby the gymnasts were alone in a room with the researcher. There was a point whereby the researcher had to aid the gymnasts by using physical contact, for example, to help them up or make them perform a skill. Issues with this is that if the researcher had no experience with gymnastics, they could touch the young athletes incorrectly, which could lead to physical harm of the athlete. It also may cause them emotional harm and could potentially lead to sort of sexual harassment lawsuits, which could then lead to a sort of prison sentence. So, like I say, very, very serious consequences if you don't handle them properly. Other issues with this is that it could also mean that you lose your professional accreditation, making your research of uncreditable. No one will sort of use your research for any good. It won't be seen in a very good light. It is preventable though by making sure that you know why they know why you're touching them. Like example, you let them know, right, I'm going to help you do a flip now. etc. So they know exactly why you're touching them, for the reason you're doing it. This will then avoid any sort of confusion with the athletes and making sure they know exactly what you're doing, so they don't go off run into their parents about anything that's gone wrong, anything like that. And it would just generally mean that everyone has an understanding with each other, and nothing gets pursued as sort of like misunderstanding, like sexual harassment or things like that. Scenario 2 is in a scenario whereby the gymnast was taking part in a multi-stage fitness test. The gymnast became exhausted and asked to cease taking part in the experiment. The researcher then refused to let her withdraw and made her carry on to the point whereby she collapsed. Again, some very serious issues can come as a result of this, because the researcher will be breaking some of the rules, such as that it could cause physical harm to the participant by pushing them beyond their limits. This could then obviously potentially cause them injuries. I would also be breaching their right to withdraw. So obviously, if they want to withdraw, the researcher would have to let them. This could then mean that the researcher would lose their BASIS accreditation, having not worked into their guidelines. Again, though, this can be preventable by always allowing the participant to withdraw whenever they want. Like I say, obviously that's their right, so they should be allowed to do that. Moving on to scenario 3, the researcher does a test on the gymnast, such as the multi-stage fitness test, which was not in the research brief, and therefore the gymnasts and their parents have not been able to consent to doing this test. Now, the biggest issue with this is obviously it's kind of deception, because obviously I've not put it in the researcher has not put it in their brief, and therefore the gymnasts have not been able to consent to doing that individual test, and also because they're young athletes, their parents would have to consent to it as well. So because the researcher hasn't put it in their brief, it would technically mean that they haven't given full consent. This could again lead to the researcher losing their BASIS accreditation, as they wouldn't be working within their guidelines. This could also lead to financial fines as well. Could also put the participants at risk of harm. Say if they had asthma, none of the other tests might have caused this to flare up, but obviously being the multi-stage fitness test, using that sort of area, it could mean that they could get injured in that respect. They could not be ready to do that sort of thing, which could therefore mean that it could cause the participants some sort of harm. Again, this can obviously be preventable by always letting the subjects always getting the subjects and parental consent for doing all the tests that you're going to be doing. So always include every test that you're doing in the entire brief at the start of the test. Moving on to scenario 4, which is where the researcher includes doing a maximal test on the gymnast, such as the multi-stage fitness test or the 1-minute press-up test, without engaging them in a sufficient warm-up prior to doing the test. Now, due to the fact that in this case the researcher is putting the participants at risk of harm, it could mean that they lose their BASIS accreditation, as you're obviously, like I say, you're breaching that rule there. Also, it shows the researcher is being incompetent, as he should know that that sort of test would need a very comprehensive warm-up to avoid the injury there. This sort of thing can be preventable by just generally having a good knowledge of the sort of topic area and having practice doing the tests. So sort of doing mock tests with peers beforehand to make sure that everything's sort of flows properly, and that they're able to cope and things like that. And this would therefore mean that you're more competent in doing the tests when you're doing them with the young gymnasts. Then the final scenario is where the researcher is unaware of the level of the gymnasts and includes doing difficult activities such as the high rings, which the gymnasts have never practiced. The gymnasts the researcher made all the gymnasts do all the tests that had been in the brief, regardless of their prior experience. Now, this could have particular issues for the researcher, as he's putting them in harm's way, especially if the researcher doesn't know if he isn't competent in this sort of thing, he doesn't know how to keep the athletes safe while they're up on the rings and things like that. Obviously, quite high up as well, so it could cause them some considerable injury if they haven't, if the gymnasts haven't ever done this sort of thing before. This could obviously again lead to the researcher losing their bases accreditation, making it harder for them to be allowed to do any research again, as well as any research that they have done or been doing being widely discredited. And obviously the way that the researcher could actually prevent this would be by talking with the participants and making sure that the researcher understands what their capability is and what they're able to do. Obviously, again, making sure that they have their right to withdraw, so that if they don't want to do the sort of the hiring test, they don't have to if they don't want to, and things like that. So thank you for listening. That was my Unit 4 Research Methods, Assignment 1, Ethical and Legal Issues with Research, done by me, Harry Brown.